Building 7 of the World Trade Center complex was not hit by an airplane, yet it collapsed at all but exactly free fall speed. This runs counter to all previous knowledge of structure fires and the behavior of steel structures while aflame. Never before or since this event has a steel frame building collapsed into itself at nearly free fall speed from fire, and that of course is the official story. Observe the footage of Building 7's collapse and compare it to other footage of buildings being demolished. They will be virtually indistinguishable from one another. There is a telltale buckling of the roof, which begins collapse before the rest of the building toward the center, which is exactly what one would expect during demolition of a building. Another very instructive comparison to make is between the footage of Building 7 and other high-rise buildings that have caught fire. One of the Liberty Towers in Philadelphia, for example, burned for hours. Officials on the scene described it as probably the worst high-rise building fire in American history. The building is lit up like a torch bright as the sun, and the images of this event couldn't be any more different from Building 7 on September 11th. The fire in Building 7 is emitting very dark smoke, which indicates an oxygen-starved fire. There are other skyscraper fires to compare this event to. There was one in Spain in 2005, same story. Much bigger, brighter fire and no collapse. And definitely no collapse at free fall speed, something all but impossible to accomplish unless a building's core support apparatus has been neutralized. Either New York City employed the most mediocre of engineers and architects, or the official explanation of this event as a fire-caused collapse is simply incorrect. There's much more to bring up regarding Building 7, but I'll move on to another point. Testimony of former FBI agent Sibel Edmonds. And recently, this brave woman broke a federal gag order by announcing to the press that the agency she was a member of had direct contact with Al-Qaeda and bin Laden all the way up to the very day of September 11th. This is a startling revelation, as there is already a bucket full of evidence linking American intelligence to Al-Qaeda, which in Arabic means the base, and is in literal reference to a computer database the military kept in the 1980s of Middle Eastern mercenaries willing to do the bidding of the CIA. Combine this unsettling fact with the fact that Osama bin Laden was visited by American intelligence officials in a Saudi Arabian hospital just months before the attack, where he received dialysis treatment, and also the fact that other whistleblowers have revealed having bin Laden in the crosshairs and being ordered not to take the shot, and the possibility that Al-Qaeda is really a patsy organization under the wing of the CIA becomes more than merely idle speculation. A common response to the obvious discrepancies between the official explanation and the video footage of all three buildings collapsing in a manner consistent with demolition and inconsistent with fire is something like, well, there's really no point in going over this, since we'll never know exactly how they fell till another two planes fly into another two buildings, so let's just forget about it. If someone says something like this to you, it's important to patiently remind them that the one and only reason we are unable to ascertain the exact cause of all three collapses is because the federal government, only days after the attack, arranged for the steel debris to be shipped off to China to be melted down and used to make various slave labor products. Obviously, excavation should have begun as soon as was possible, but shipping the debris, which would have contained an abundance of forensic and ballistic evidence to a foreign country just days after the attacks, constitutes tampering with evidence in a federal crime scene. It's a very serious offense. At least 6 of the alleged suicide hijackers have come out publicly declaring that they are alive and not involved in any terrorism. Despite this amazing fact, these individuals remain on the FBI's list of the 19 hijackers, and no explanation or acknowledgement of this fact is offered. In the 1940s, a B-25 flew headfirst in foggy weather into the Empire State Building. There was some loss of life, and it was quite a challenge for the firefighters at the time, but no big deal. No collapse. Samples of nanothermite found at and near the crime scene within the dust of the debris. Samples acquired and studied by Dr. Stephen Jones, physicist. Nanothermite is significant because it's an industrial explosive, commonly used by the military. Its presence within the debris is extremely difficult to explain from the standpoint of the official story, since there is really no conceivable explanation for this particular substance to have been present naturally. The director of the 9/11 Commission, the federal government's excuse for an investigation, is an individual named Philip Zelikow. The problem with Philip Zelikow is that he co-authored a book with Condoleezza Rice and has close ties and friendships with several members of the Bush administration. This is just one example of a multitude of conflicts of interest within the 9/11 Commission and its final report. NASA thermographic pictures from months after the attack show significant amounts of molten steel still pooled beneath the rubble. The temperatures of this molten steel far exceed the maximum burning temperature of jet fuel, and that's jet fuel at its maximum. Forget about jet fuel after months of smoldering. There's no way these temperatures would be at the level necessary to maintain a pool of molten steel. Do you know what is consistent with lingering pools of molten steel, though? Excessive amounts of the military-grade industrial explosive, nanothermite. The Project for a New American Century. This is a document published by a neoconservative think tank in the year 2000, within which the neocons complain about how their agenda for securing American dominance during the upcoming century isn't progressing quickly enough for them, and that a new Pearl Harbor, as they put it, is necessary if the American people are going to be sufficiently galvanized in the future wars for empire. About 1 year later, they got the, quote, new Pearl Harbor they were looking for. Please rigorously fact-check any of this that sounds far-fetched or made up to you. I believe that exposing the crime of 9/11 is key to putting the brakes on this entire nightmare that has been thrust upon us since then. First by the neocons during Bush's 8 years, and now it's become obvious, also by Obama's fake liberal front and his Wall Street handlers. It's extremely difficult to stir the American people into becoming proactive. Very few things have been able to do that. But once it's done, it's one of the most insurmountable forces the globe's ever seen. The overwhelming public outcry over Vietnam springs to mind as a powerful example of this. Another is the progress made with workers' rights in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I believe this type of awakening and empowerment is in order once again, and the true realization of the motives and culprits behind 9/11 is precisely the remedy to sociological disorder that has plagued our nation since that horrible day.